So the countdown has begun. You're preparing to retire within the next year, and you're wondering, what are the things that I should be considering to set myself up a year from now in the best possible position when I'm getting ready to not just retire, but optimize my retirement plan from there. If this is your first time watching, I am Kyle Kuyat. Welcome into Retirement Redefined. As always, I'm joined by my main man, Jake Gardner. Jake, how are you?
Excited to be here. It's the final countdown.
Some would call it the I'm not going to do
You're
it.
not going to sing it?
No, I can't.
Oh, sing it for the people.
It's the final countdown.
I think for a lot of people watching today, Jake, they want to make sure nothing gets missed. The good news is you have time, right? Because there's a lot of folks that have been retired for a number of years. And if they could rewind the clock back to being about a year or so from retirement, they'd probably say, man, I wish I would have knew that sooner. Yeah. So today we're talking about, again, the top 8 things that we typically will recommend to clients that are in a similar situation. Obviously, this is going to depend on your situation too. But let's run through, kind of high level. What are some of the first things they should be considering? And then we'll name kind of the top 8 in no particular order.
No particular order. Okay. So
that wouldn't offend number 8. You know what I mean?
Yeah, number 8. First in our hearts, though. So one thing you need to do is you need to run your final numbers one more time, or maybe 1,000 more times, depending on who you are. We've seen it all. But run those numbers one more time, right? You're entering that kind of final stretch before you're ready to put your notice in. Run those numbers once more. This would be a good time. This is going to sound self-serving, but this would be a good time to have a professional double check your work as you're getting ready to jump into retirement and kind of begin that final phase of your life there. So update those retirement projections, update your budget, stress test your portfolio, identify which income sources you're going to be leaving behind in your working years and which ones will follow you or begin in the early part of retirement, or maybe even later in retirement, depending on when you are actually pulling the trigger. And then confirm, based off your portfolio, your income sources, the amount that you've saved, the amount you plan to spend, what is your withdrawal rate going to be? Roughly, where is that? And then what sort of withdrawal guardrails do we need to put around that to make sure we stay in the safe zone there?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we want to make sure we cover the things you can especially control now. Obviously, a lot of that's going to become even more important when you're in retirement.
Yep.
But one of the questions I get all of the time, I'm on kind of the front end of the bus here at our firm, where a lot of people that reach out to us, I'm the first person you talk to, which is maybe a good or a bad thing. I don't know yet.
It's usually good.
It's usually good.
We've got some complaints, but
yeah, it's only uphill from here, right?
Downhill.
No, uphill.
I'll tell the team. I'll let them know.
Yeah. Anyway, all that to be said, one of the questions I get all the time is, where should I be saving? I'm making a good amount of money. I have a year left. I'm at this inflection point of making these decisions. Should I still be maxing out my retirement accounts? Should I not? Should I just take up to the match and put the rest in a brokerage account so I have more flexibility? How do I evaluate my trade-offs here to actually make the most out of this last year of work?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we would love for everyone to have a really well-developed, diversified tax location savings strategy, right? If you have met with us earlier on, before the last year of your retirement, you're going to have a nice pie chart that says, hey, I've got taxable, tax-free, and tax-deferred income. But if you're not in that position, it might be time to sock away some cash, right? Just as an emergency fund, a short-term buffer against the market going down in a big way. If you are in a position where you've got some diversification there, even just a little bit of diversification there, your last year of making W-2 income could be one of those years where you just try to max out all of your deferrals, right? How do I get my income to a place where this is one of my most tax efficient years? How do I really dump this into either the market or a savings vehicle that's going to give me the best after-tax return, right? And so that's one of the things we're focused there. Your 401k, but from a budget standpoint, if you're able to max it out, this is a really good year to do that.
Yeah.
Get that tax deduction. Not really a deduction. You're just avoiding the taxes on that income. The HSA is another one, right? We love the HSA. It's our favorite. Well, I speak for myself. It's my favorite account.
You and the HSA are pretty tight.
We're pretty tight.
Yeah,
we're
you
boys.
So
the HSA is a place where you can get that tax deduction or at least defer your income into it, but it happens to also be tax-free. So no matter how long it grows or what it grows to, and when you take it out for medical purposes, it's totally tax-free, which is a huge, huge benefit.
talk to me real quick about the one-time HSA rollover. I don't think a lot of people know about this, and I want to make sure we hit on it.
Yeah. So the last year of retirement, this would be a good place if you have the budget to defer into the HSA. However, if you're looking at your budget and you're thinking, man, I've got no brokerage assets set up. I need to like really focus on building up that brokerage account. I don't have anything else to put in the HSA. You can take money out of either your 401k, if your plan allows for it, or a pre-tax IRA that you may have, and roll that into an HSA to max it out for the year. Now, you need to be pre-65. There's some timelines you got to pay attention to there. However, if you're covered by an HSA eligible plan and you have pre-tax assets, you can do a once-in-a-lifetime rollover to max it out. What I would not recommend is that you use this once-in-a-lifetime benefit to just put in $2,000. I wouldn't do that. If you've been contributing for a good part of the year, just try to max it out through cash flow and then do the rollover the following year. But this is something to pay attention to and be aware of.
Yeah, it's like a little mini Roth conversion that you can do for yourself.
On steroids.
On steroids. That's right.
By the way, the baseball season's underway. I seem to remember you saying the steroid era of baseball was your favorite.
Oh my gosh. Of course it was. Mark McGuire, Sammy Sosa going back and forth. Just
who doesn't want to see
nuking 'em?
someone nuke a ball 500 plus feet?
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
I'm going to try to keep it PG here, but I could talk a lot about that for a while. I don't want to derail us too much. You know, one of the things, speaking of steroids, that you could do for your retirement plan is giving yourself as much flexibility as possible. I don't want to use this as like prescriptive crazy because it's going to depend on your situation. But I personally, if you're like most people, if you have, I would say, not necessarily an over allocation, but the strong majority of your retirement assets are still in pre-tax accounts. I'm typically a fan of taking that last year and saving as much as you possibly can to a taxable brokerage account to give yourself as much flexibility later on down the line. Flexibility from a income perspective, flexibility, which again, that income is going to affect a number of things in retirement. The cost of health insurance, or maybe even IRMA surcharges if you're retiring or even, getting to Medicare age. It's going to impact, obviously, income-wise, is going to impact how much you pay on taxes. So where are you taking those distributions from? It's just going to give you a lot of options, and that's what you want in retirement. Retirement planning, when it comes to that, obviously there are a lot of options, which can make it complex, especially if you don't understand what you're doing. However, retirement plans that don't have a lot of optionality in them are kind of just, again, set it and forget it to some degree, but at the same time, there's not really a lot you can do. You're stuck.
Not in a good way.
Yeah, not in a good way. Right, exactly. That's my point. You're forced to be able to take that income out.
There is a
I thought we were gonna eat the table.
I thought so too. Good friend of ours, Joe Kuhn, actually,
we know Joe
said on his channel a couple times that, in your working years, taxes happen to you, and in your retirement years, you can really manage the tax situation pretty well. Now, there's some wiggle room there, right? In your working years, there are things you can do tax wise. But if you're a W-2 employee, in a lot of ways, taxes kind of just happen to you. If you don't save into other types of accounts beyond just tax deferred, taxes are going to just happen to you in retirement. Now, there's Roth conversions, things like that can rectify that situation a little, but it doesn't alleviate the fact that you're going to have to make some tough choices and pay some big taxes at some point throughout retirement.
Yeah, and again, there's a lot you can do there. There's trade-offs as much as anything. Just make sure you evaluate them on what's best for your situation. So hopefully we give you enough good rules of thumb there to be able to follow that.
Or come to us and let us evaluate them with you.
Yeah, happy to help. Reach out anytime.
Anytime.
In addition to that, one of the things I think people fail to reach out for and understand is, what are my options for health insurance? A lot of times people will walk into retirement, check the easy box of COBRA until Medicare, or even worse, they'll delay retirement until 65 just because they don't want to even have to think about the answer to this question.
I've had a recurring nightmare about people making that decision.
You doing all right? You want to speak to somebody about that?
No, I mean, I guess we get that all the
joking.
time.
We do.
I mean, people will say, well, I can't, I don't want to retire until my mid 60s because I'm not going to have coverage for health insurance. And don't get me wrong, like, health insurance outside of your Medicare age, out of those years before you get there, it's expensive. There's no way around that. There are ways to mitigate that cost a little. There are
Yeah.
other options out there for you, but it is expensive and it's tough to navigate. But with the proper plan, you can absorb the cost of that, and it should not be what keeps you from this next step in your life. So, yeah.
Yeah,
that's
no,
all I'll say about that.
I agree. I've seen too many people that have delayed retirement because of the unknown of health insurance. And again, you're right. It's a real expense, but if it's $12,000 a year and you can spend a lot more than that in retirement, retire years earlier, it's like, again, if you want to keep working, that's totally up to you. That's fine. But don't let it stop you and halt you just because you haven't gained clarity on it yet. And I think that's one of the things, right, is get that clarity. As we mentioned in some previous episodes before, we work with a firm called Move Health. You don't have to work with them, but they're a great resource. We actually pay them for the privilege to be able to send some of our clients to them. I believe you could reach out to them again for free. It doesn't cost you anything. So we'll link them down below if you want to get some clarity on that for your situation. But either way, whether it's Move or somebody else, get clarity on what those options are. Because again, that's going to be a huge part of your retirement plan, whether you're on Medicare or not. You still are going to want to make those. Not all Medicare is obviously created equal, right? So there's a lot of decisions to still be made here. You just want to make sure you have that clarity ahead of time. In addition to that, Jake, anything else from like a workplace insurance that they should be thinking about?
Yeah, just check your options on the other benefits you're receiving through work, right? So some life insurance can follow you if it's group insurance. Some of that can follow you into retirement. That might make sense. There's a number of reasons that can make sense, right? From estate planning, if you have a mortgage or a few other things you'd like to pay off if something happened to you, or would like your spouse to pay off if something happened to you more appropriately. That could be an option for you. The disability insurance, really, it's irrelevant at this point. If you're retiring, the reason you're retiring is because there's not a disability gap in that retirement plan. The one that's really important, though, as you're heading into retirement, and best done like ahead of time, because in retirement, we want you to relax. We want you to go and do the things that you want to do in your ideal life, but make sure all of your beneficiaries are set up correctly on accounts. I know we're talking about insurance right now, but on your retirement accounts, on bank accounts, on insurances, whether that's life insurance or whatever, make sure your beneficiaries are set up so that there's nothing that's going to pop out of the woodwork if something happens on your life and not go to the right person, or at least become an issue for someone as they're working through the estate.
Yeah, outside of health insurance for people that are planning to retire, we've hit on it a little bit, but it's taxes, right?
Yep.
As you mentioned earlier in the conversation, taxes are one of the things that happen to you a lot of times while you're working. And when you get to this inflection point of retirement, you're still going to probably have to pay some taxes, but the choice, at least for how you pay those, for at least the time being, more likely than not, is in your hands, which could, for a lot of people, feel overwhelming. They're just like, I know enough to be dangerous, but I don't know what I don't know. And the last thing I want to have happen is I get a couple years out and, I didn't have a proper plan for this. I missed my window, I missed my opportunity, or I paid more than I initially even should have, or I could have avoided some of these taxes. So what are the things that people should be thinking about today? Again, if they're 12 months out or so from retirement, what are the things they should be thinking about when it comes to setting that up properly and giving themselves the best chance to optimize their tax situation?
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing is in the first year of retirement, we have a little bit more control over how much income we're going to take. Not too many things can, a lot can happen in a year, don't get me wrong, but it's not as if your portfolio is going to be here versus 15 years down the road. It's just harder to predict where things are going to end up. So estimate that first year taxable income. Where are you taking money from? How much is that going to cost you in terms of taxes? What bracket are you going to be in? And make sure you understand pretty intimately where that's going to be. So once you know that, you have the opportunity to plan things like Roth conversions. Are you going to be in position to do Roth conversions? Particularly if you're before Social Security and Medicare age, there's a really unique opportunity and window there to take advantage of some of those lower tax brackets you'll be in. Particularly if you project out to have an RMD problem or have some sort of tax torpedo coming your way in your 70s, that's a really impactful time to make those decisions. So you need to know where that tax bracket's going to be at. Depending on how old you are running into retirement, looking at the ACA marketplace, seeing if you're going to get any subsidies, try to understand that game a little bit. And again, we utilize Move Health as a partner here, but we do a lot of planning around if there's enough flexibility in the types of assets you've saved so far, will we have the opportunity for marketplace credits or not? And how does that affect what we're spending on healthcare early on? And then the other thing you need to pay attention to, which if you're a W-2 employee, you will have never had to really pay attention to. I shouldn't say that. If you have RSUs and things like that, you may have had to pay attention to it. But you're probably going to want to pay quarterly taxes at this point. So quarterly taxes are going to be, so like April 15th is tax day, and then there's July 15th and so on. Every quarter, you're going to want to pay your tax bill so that you don't get hit with late penalties or accruals for underpayment. And if you're under age 60, that becomes super important because you're not going to really be withholding from your withdrawals for the most part.
Yeah.
I guess there are unique circumstances where you may be, but if you're not and you're living off a brokerage account, or if you are living off of your IRA but not withholding, you're going to want to pay those quarterly taxes. So be aware of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of things, obviously, from a tax planning perspective that you're going to want to get in order. One of the things that, again, we do a lot of tax stuff for clients, including now even going forward, tax filing for clients. So it's one of those things where, again, the taxes are a reality of retirement, whether you like it or not. So if you don't want to have to get all the clarity yourself on that, again, reach out to somebody who can help you with that. Because, again, out of things you can control going forward, that is probably the thing that's, from a dollar and cents standpoint, is going to be able to help you the most. Now, that being said, I want to get to our next one, which is number 5, and that's the investment side.
Mambo number 5.
Mambo number 5. That's right.
I just can't. It's a Friday. I can't help myself today.
So, Mambo, let me ask you a question over there, all right? A lot of people are obviously disciplined savers that are listening to this. We get a lot of you reaching out to us. We know the makeup of our audience pretty well. But one of the things that they are a little bit afraid of, obviously and rightfully so, is, hey, if I'm a year out from retirement, assuming everything else goes according to plan, I'm feeling good about it right now. But what happens if over the next 12 months, market's down 20%, right? Yeah. Am I positioned in a way where am I taking too much risk where all of a sudden if I get there 12 months from now, I got to wait another 12 or 24 months to make it happen? So what are some of the things that people should be thinking about from an investment perspective when it comes to positioning themselves properly, where they're not taking everything off the table, because we need to make this retirement money last throughout retirement, but we're also putting ourselves in a position to be able to say, hey, if I get there 12 months from now, it's still a green light in a retirement. It's not a yellow or a red light.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, we probably help people understand better than most, I would say, that even though you're retiring doesn't mean you need to bury all your money in a coffee can, right? That can be the tendency is to say, hey, I've saved all this up and I really don't want a bear market or a financial crisis like in 2007 to 2009. I don't want that to sink my entire retirement. I've seen that happen to other people, and totally understand that, right? So one thing you want to check with your investments is, first off, make sure the investments you hold are diversified enough so that there's not any one company or one type of holding that can sink your entire retirement. You don't want that. But number 2, how do we create some buffer between us and what I would consider a bad bear market of 5, 6, 7 years to recovery? If the average bear market lasts 3.5 to 5 years, there's some wiggle room based off of how people actually define bear markets, but from top to bottom, back to top of the market, if that takes 3.5 to 5 years, then you're going to want a cash buffer, a bond portfolio that can weather that storm until stocks recover and you're able to start living off that again. So if you're heading into retirement and let's say you have a $1 million portfolio, right? And right now you're positioned 100% equity. Everything you own is in stocks. That's probably a bit aggressive. It's not that can't work.
Sure.
But if you're spending 4, 5, 5.5% of your portfolio, you're putting yourself in a pretty tight position if the portfolio were to have a 30% drawdown, which doesn't happen every year, but it's not unheard of. It's not uncommon for bear markets to go 30% down off of the stock market overall. So be aware that you're trying to position in a way that insulates you a bit from that. So if you're spending $50,000 off of a $1 million portfolio, maybe you have to have $50,000, $100,000, 1 to 2 years of expenses outside of the stock and bond market completely in money market funds or in cash. not straight up cash in your checking, by the way. So cash like high yield savings accounts, short-term treasury reserves, money market funds, those sorts of things. And then beyond that, maybe even introducing a little bit of a fixed income component to the portfolio, whether that's, a bond fund, which those work just fine for 2022, notwithstanding. But those bond portfolios can give you a little extra buffer in the medium term, or something like, this isn't really the first place we go for this, but something like a short-term fixed annuity or something like that to give you some return, but also the ability to take some funds out if you need to.
Yeah, and if that feels wrong or like you're de-risking too much, I would view it this way, to tie it back into what we talked about, the tax planning side, especially if you have a good amount of pre-tax dollars. I view your bucket number one, for example, your cash bucket, your cash alternative bucket, as you mentioned, almost like your dry powder to accelerate some Roth conversions or make Roth conversions more attractive, especially if it's in a taxable account where you own that cash. So you're not having to withhold from your pre-tax accounts, right? You're actually converting the full amount by paying the taxes from an outside source. So again, there's things like that to consider. Again, as I mentioned before, all these things are interrelated, whether we like it or not. But again, just make sure you're in a position where you're not having to rethink or reevaluate retirement because you just took too much risk and it was unnecessary. That's obviously not a success, at least in my mind. So unless you're willing to face the music potentially, if that does happen, right? And again, everybody's in a different spot. Now, one of the things that I would say is universal across the board is number 6.
Yeah.
It's getting your legal house in order, right? Look, I get it. Estate planning is not fun and sexy to talk about. I don't think anybody really enjoys it unless you're maybe an estate planning attorney. You're going to get paid for it, but whatever. All that being said, it's still critically important. And most people that reach out to us either don't have it done, and I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad here. It's just the reality. Either it's not done and we don't have it, or hey, we did it, but the kids were 2, 3, and 5, and now they're 20. I don't know. Whatever.
Now their kids are 2, 3, 5.
Yeah, I was about to do the math, and I was like, hang on. Anyway, all that being said, it's one of those things where it's important. And for a lot of people, there has to be, and we've talked about this in some other episodes too, where it's almost like there has to be a fire underneath your butt to make it actually happen. And a lot of times what that looks like in reality is you're thrown into the mix where maybe it was your parents or you've seen from your spouse's parents or something like that, where an estate was either buttoned up, but more often than times than not, it wasn't. And it's like, oh boy, we want to make sure that we don't do that to our kids or our loved ones, et cetera. So what does that look like, Jake? Like outside of, a basic will, maybe a power of attorney, healthcare directives, and maybe like a simple trust or even just titling on their accounts in general. Like what are some of the things that if somebody's watching this, it's like, all right, you know what? I get it. Maybe this is the fire underneath my butt right now listening to this. Like what are those things that I should be considering if I do want to get this updated and just make sure my bases are covered?
Yeah, I mean, certainly making sure your wills, powers of attorney, healthcare directives, and even if you have a basic revocable living trust, those are things you want to review in this last year heading into retirement. Make sure they're relevant and current and that they comply with current state laws. We do tell people those sorts of things you should have reviewed every 3 to 7 years. 7 years kind of on the long end because things can change, whether it's in your personal life or in the law. So those documents are good to have done. A couple things to note there with powers of attorney. You want to make sure that the people who are going to be making decisions about your finances, if you can't, are the right people. So reviewing that regularly, super important. Same thing with healthcare directives. These are the folks that are going to make decisions on your behalf if you can't make those decisions for your own health. And I don't know about you, but like that would be super important to me. Obviously for me, it's my wife, right? But then who's the backup? That becomes really important. So make sure that those are right. It's not that difficult. It might not be fun to read through estate plan documents, but not that difficult to pull them out and just maybe dust them off. It's probably been some time. And make sure that they've got the right people there. We don't run into this too much, but because a lot of our folks are trying to retire early, we do sometimes run into the fact that they have children at home still. Usually not super young children, but teenagers, maybe heading to college pretty soon. Make sure that those kids have the right guardian in place to take care of them. Maybe, 10 years ago it was your sister, but your sister's gone crazy and, is now living on a commune I don't know. This is going off the rails. But that's probably not the right person to be your guardian
Or
for your
it could
kids
be,
anymore.
you know?
Or it could be, depending on where you're at the past couple of years. But no, it's if you still have kids at home, it's still important to have the right guardians in place. I think more often than like a crazy sister, Kyle. Although, my younger sister is going to be living with us for the summer. She's pretty
slightly
funky.
crazy.
Yeah. If it's not that, right? Because of course it could always be that. More often it's going to be you named your parents 25 years ago when you had your first baby, and now your first baby is 30, but your youngest is 16,
Right.
and your parents are in their late 60s or 70s, and maybe it's not the right time for them to be taking over. So anyways,
Just doing the math on that.
Yeah.
If your kids are 30 and your parents are in their 60s, you got to be. Anyway,
young,
we'll skip that.
real young. Yeah. 70s or 80s.
There you
Put
go.
it that way.
Yeah.
So that's one thing to consider. And then also, and finally, titling of your assets. Are they in the trust? Are they outside the trust? Do you have beneficiaries in place? You need to make sure you've got the right titling there going on.
I agree. All right. Section number 7. I'm going to use an analogy of what one of our clients told us, and I love it. I use it all the time. Should probably give them some royalties, maybe a discount.
At this point.
Discount, double check. Is retirement proofing your home. Now, what does that mean? Well, typically when you retire, you're going to spend a little bit more time at home than you normally do. A lot of times people look around, they go, man, I've been meaning to do something to that, right? Or maybe we should get our roof fixed or our deck updated. And all of a sudden what becomes, I don't know, sometimes it's an unplanned expense for people. And maybe it's a $10,000 planned expense is quite a bit more, right? Or it certainly can be. It's easy to accumulate. So one of the things you can do, especially in this year leading up to it, is, okay, well, what are those one-time expenses going to be? Certainly account for them, number one. But number two, while you have an income and you can pay for them, a lot of people just mental math on this, rather pay for it now while they're working, get it knocked out. So those things are done, right? So what are some of those things that somebody could take advantage of in this last year or maybe or so of retirement, or of an income, making an income working before retirement that they could use to retirement proof their own home?
I think, one of the things that you want to avoid, like Kyle said, is just looking around and all of a sudden realizing I want to change everything that's going on here. So there's a few questions to ask. And one thing that I've heard of people doing, I don't know that we've had a client specifically do this, but take a staycation for like 1 or 2 weeks and just live in your home for a little while and see if there's something that pops up to you, and try to prepare yourself for what that's going to feel like in retirement. So you can look around and say, what are the things I might want to fix?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if we can cash flow projects leading into retirement, like the roof being replaced, or even something as big as, or as different as, is this the right home for us to be living in? Mm-hmm. Making those decisions leading into retirement are going to be a heck of a lot easier than when you've retired and then what you have to live on is what you have to live on. That decision's already been made. Not that you can't go back to work, but that's not the goal.
Right.
Being able to understand, like, is this the right home? What are those things that need to be replaced or fixed? And being able to cash flow it rather than pulling out of maybe a pre-tax retirement account, or even if it's not pre-tax, like an account that you're planning to live on for 30 plus years, it's going to be an easier pill to swallow.
Yeah, and whether it's the home or any other additional larger one-time expenses for that matter, whether it's cars, whether it's weddings, these are things that a lot of people just sometimes they don't think about until they're happen or planning to happen, but make sure you bake those into your plan. Otherwise, again, if you, like you said, if you're pulling that out of a pre-tax account or even pulling out of a taxable brokerage account, some of the things we talked about earlier, there's a ripple effect impact on that. So lastly, we want to talk about how to leverage some of the additional benefits or maybe even PTO, things that you've accrued in your work, and then also making that transition into retirement. And before you do it, you may want to take some vacations, right? A lot of people reach out to us. They say, hey, I want to travel. I want to do all these different things. Obviously, that's great to do in retirement, but hey, you know what? If this is your last year, you have some PTO that potentially rolled over, or maybe still some PTO on the docket. You don't really have to wait till retirement. You can start to do some of these things now, like you mentioned with the staycation just a few minutes ago.
Yeah. And I love this strategy too, because not only does it give you the ability to book those vacations while you still have cash flow, which really helps, helps
Yeah.
you to be able to justify it and feel good about it, but it also gives you the chance to sort of test the waters on, are you really a vacation or travel person? I do think that there's a lot of folks who don't travel that much throughout their working years because they are busy and it's harder to get away for a week or 2 weeks or heck, even 3 weeks. I know that's a big vacation. So if you do that test run and you've budgeted your travel out for the next year or even 2 years, that is a really good way to spend your last year of work by booking those things ahead of time with the cash flow you do have, honestly, to ensure that you actually do it. Because shoot, when you jump off that retirement cliff or that retirement plane and you're wondering, is this parachute gonna work?
Yeah.
It can be hard to justify, or at least internally justify, you know, $10, $15, $20,000 on a vacation, or even if you've been hoping for and wanting to take that vacation for years, that can be really hard to swallow when it comes time to actually pay for it.
I agree. So at the end here, I want to talk about a few of just lastly the frequent questions we get. Obviously, we try to answer as much of those in the previous 8 sections, but there's some nuances to some of these things. So let's rapid fire some of these, Jake. First is, when should I apply for health insurance to avoid a gap in coverage? Like, when should I be thinking about that?
Yeah, it definitely depends what age you are, but let's just say you're retiring before 65. You should be connecting with someone who can help you with life health insurance a couple months before you're leaving work. You don't want to leave that until, the week or two before, or heaven forbid, the day after you leave.
Yeah.
You want to have that kind of locked in and prepared for when you leave.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, especially towards the end of retirement. Don't do that to yourself and wait or make a quick decision just because you ran out of time. The next thing is, and we didn't talk about this too much, but if somebody has a pension, right? And obviously that's something to gear up towards, right? There's some people, I talked to somebody the other day that has enough PTO that actually rolled over all the number of years that they could retire earlier. That PTO, that's almost 2 years of PTO that's accrued, actually goes into their years of service and increases their pension, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different things that can happen with that. But how do I, if I'm a year out, how should I be evaluating things like that? Whether I take the lump sum, whether I do the annuity, whether I take the joint and survivor, like what are some of the things I should be thinking about, especially if I'm at this inflection point where I'm going to have to make that decision sooner rather than later? Because for a lot of people, the pensions too, they make the election, as you're well aware, and sometimes there's a couple month long gap until that actually kicks in.
Yeah. Yeah, the pension is an interesting one because there's a lot of options that are presented for most folks when they get a pension. If it's, like Kyle mentioned, joint and survivor, period certain, which would mean if you passed, your beneficiaries would get a payout for that period, whether you're living or not, or single life, joint life. There's all these different options. And it also has to fit into your plan, right? Do you need that income?
Mm-hmm.
Would you rather have the optionality of taking the lump sum? If we're just going to rough math this, try to imagine if your pension is giving you a quote unquote withdrawal rate off that lump sum of 6, 7, 8%, or even higher than that. It's usually not much higher than that, but sometimes it's a little bit. It's tough to replicate that off of a portfolio.
Yeah.
So if you're on the edge of making retirement work and you could use that guaranteed income, a lot of times that pension can make a heck of a lot of sense. On the flip side of that, if you're not on the edge, if you're more likely to end up with more money than you ever imagined having, and you're underspending or you're projected to underspend, the pension lump sum could make a good deal of sense there. Allow it to grow for the rest of your life. Use some of that as an option creation machine to be able to do Roth conversions or to give it away to charity in a tax efficient way. There's a lot that could be said about that, but I do think the pension decision is one that you gotta really think through.
All right. Lastly is, some of you have, and actually a lot of clients we work with have some form of equity compensation, whether it's in the form of RSUs, whether it's in the form of some other types of, other ways they can get that. Obviously, there's a number of different ways. I won't belabor the question here, but what happens to some of my unvested stock, or even what should I be thinking about in relation to like the investment stuff we talked about earlier? If I have a good amount of company stock, is that something I should be selling out in this last year? Should I wait until I'm retired? Am I like, what does that look like typically, and how should I be thinking about this?
Yeah, the RSUs, the unvested stock options, that can create a lot of optionality. So some of you will retire, and if you have a certain amount of service at your job, they may vest some of those options or those RSUs when you retire. If your company stock makes up a really large part of your portfolio, it might be time to sell some of it, right? And some of the things we've talked about with capital gains and harvesting capital gains in past videos, that's going to be a really good way for you to diversify and create some income in the first couple of years of retirement too. But I think the most important thing there is make sure you understand whether that's going to vest when you retire or if you're going to lose out on some of that. It doesn't mean you should delay your retirement if some of that's going away. That's always going to be the case for you if that's how they've set it up.
So there you have it. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully the 8 things that we covered, in addition to some of the FAQs at the end, were helpful as you're gearing up for retirement. Again, if you're looking for additional help on this, don't be afraid to reach out. Reach to us at definingwealth.com, or of course you can click the link down below, and we'd love to be able to help you out with that. Jake, anything else you want to share with anyone else today?
No, I mean, definitely go through your checklist when you're in that last year of retirement. Make sure you feel ready, not just from a number standpoint, but emotionally. You know what you're going to do. You know what's going to happen. It's a fun and exciting time, and this is a good time to do those things that maybe have been hanging out there for a long period, and make sure that you're all tied up.
Yeah, and if you have any additional questions for us, make sure you comment them down below. We like to do some FAQ episodes here on Retirement Redefined. And if you're still here, thank you for watching, first and foremost. And secondly, if you'd like to see more episodes like this, make sure you go ahead and click subscribe. I'm Kyle Kuyat. Thank you so much for watching.
I'm Jake Gardner.
And we'll see you next time.